Corn School is brought to you by BASF and Pride Seeds.
Bernard Tobin here for the Corn School, just outside Exeter, Ontario today. Beautiful May day, joined by Ken Curra, market agronomist, Pride Seeds. Hey, thanks for taking the time.
Hey, no problem. We're just about to get into a soybean plot here, and beautiful day for it.
Awesome. Now you got a couple of plots to go.
Yep.
We're going to talk about planting, how the season's gone. Take us back to earlier in the month, the late April, Ken. How things shaped up. How's the crop looking? How's corn looking? And how's it come through the spring?
Yeah, so the basic, looking at the last month and compare it to 2015, where everything dried off at once, and it was, for most of the province, save I think for the extreme southwest, 2015 was open up, all the ground was ready. We were drying out in a big hurry, so that was something growers had to watch, and away we went, right? And the rest was history. This year a little bit different, a little bit more of a paced out, methodical approach. Your true clay guys have had to be very patient. What I really noticed for the territory I cover, which is Highway 4 east of the Niagara, I have my clay pockets in there. Those guys had to be patient. But what was really interesting is the good loams, say East Middlesex, west part of Oxford and other areas, those good loamy soils that are typically pretty early actually didn't behave all that early this year. They were wet underneath. That first week of corn planting, the first week of May, guys had to be really careful as far as how they work that ground. Cultivator and implement setup and planter setup. When that ground is wet underneath, you got to watch what you're doing.
Yeah. And that's the case. It's pretty cool, pretty backward.
It was pretty cool.
Not a lot of rain, but just that malaise and that sort of flat line.
Yeah, lots of cold winds, and warm wind like today pulls moisture out of the ground. Cold winds just don't. We never had a nice warm rain in there. Would have really done a nice job of pulling that cold clamminess out of the soil. It didn't seem to matter where I went that first 7 or 8 days of corn planting. If you were looking up seed in the furrow, that furrow was just downright cold. It wasn't cool, dark soil. It was cold. And the really interesting thing I noted is even on some heavier sand loams or silt loams where the soil was sticking to the plant or sticking to the openers or to the front coulters, you take that soil and you really couldn't put it in your hand and make a ribbon or a ball out of it. It was friable. It was fairly loose. It wasn't all that wet, but it was cold and it was sticky, and that was really something that you had to work with.
Now it's May 20th. We're pretty much done corn. A few stragglers on wet grounds left to go.
Yep.
Half the soybeans pretty much in.
Yep.
Good forecast. Maybe we'll get most of that in the next few days.
Yep.
Let's talk about June. I mean, you talked about soil conditions. You got some soil consolidation. What's June going to look like for this crop? And depending on the weather and stuff.
Yeah, and that's the big one, depending on the weather. So. In terms of soil conditions, and we talk about being wet underneath in areas, I look at traffic, and we have some big planters out there right now with really comprehensive fertility programs. They're pulling the nurse tank or the dry fertilizer cart, center commodity planters. So you have the bulk tanks, you have a lot of weight up that center 10 or 12 feet, those center 4 rows of these big planters. And I think in these areas where we saw that moisture underneath, 2-3 inches and further down, I think we're going to see some of those traffic issues on a few of my early emergence walks this week. We're starting to see a few fields pop up, and we can see some of those traffic patterns in those rows where they're just a little bit slower emerging. So that'll be something to watch for. Manure traffic is another one, obviously. Even with drag lines, tractors still got to drive across the field. Obviously, it's lighter than in tankers or tanker trains. Again, that's traffic we have to watch for, and when it's wet underneath. You look at the weather in June, and if you get a tender June, and what I call a tender June is moderate temperatures and some frequent rainfall to keep the soils tender, kind of keep those roots looking for different areas, whatever else, those sins tend to get overlooked or get corrected by Mother Nature. If you turn hot and dry in June, if there's any kind of sidewall smearing in the furrow or any kind of compaction around the furrow, those ailments start to show up pretty quick as the corn enters that rapid growth stage and just can't get the water and the nutrients as fast as it needs to.
Let's talk a little bit about weed control. In my drive around the last couple of days, I've seen a lot of clean fields. It looks good. What's your sense of what it's going to look like in the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, corn weed control, I think the only thing I'm going to watch for right now is we have some fields that have been in the better part of 4 weeks. Yeah. They've been in the ground, and they're just poking through now. And your soil-applied chemistries, generally that's again, depending on rainfall and weather conditions, is a 6 to 8 week window. You're really counting on canopy closure to kind of take it the rest of the way. We've had this big wide window in those fields from planting to emergence, and I think growers are going to have to watch for the potential for those late flushes to catch them just prior to canopy. So we'll need to be on top of those fields, whether it's a late pass. If you're planning on the second pass, obviously there's an opportunity to clean those up, but if it was a comprehensive all up front program, I'm going to have to keep an eye on those fields. The other thing I'm noticing, in general, boy, you can really see the fields that have a history of a single mode of action, particularly the no-till soybean fields right now. Over the last week, lots of dandelions and other beautiful stuff in there, versus the fields that had a much more comprehensive historical weed control approach.
Right. Final question for you. Nitrogen. I mean, this has been cool this spring. What's your sense on how much nitrogen these crops are going to need to get really going? And maybe even on splits.
Yeah, so I'll talk about splits, and I won't get into some of the nitrogen sensing technologies that are out there, like N-Watch and some of the other technologies, Green Seeker, etc. But I'll just stick to a few basic statements on that. These next few weeks coming up really are going to dictate, if you have an early pass of nitrogen already applied and incorporated, these next few weeks will incorporate how much of that is actually getting into the plant, what kind of utilization am I getting, and then that dictates what do I need for the late pass, whether that's side dress now or whether that's some of the taller corn that we're going to do with high clearance machines. We got to watch this weather. If it's hot and dry, not going to lose a whole lot of nitrogen. Frequent rainfall, like we've seen the last couple of years, definitely need to watch that. Soil type weighs into that. Fields with a history of manure is another part of that equation. So that's something to watch and consult with agronomists over the next 3-4 weeks to really fine tune those rates. And hey, there's no need to put excess nitrogen there if we don't have to. So let's watch the weather and let's make the right decisions.
Awesome. Hey, so you've got a couple more soybean plots to do, and then maybe time to get a little bit of fishing in? Or
time to get a little bit of fishing in. We'll see if I can get days like today. There could be some fishing on the weekends,
and watch the Blue Jays win.
And listen to the Blue Jays on the radio while we're fishing. That works too.
Awesome.
Right on.
Thanks, Kent. We'll see you back here in the field before too long.
Right on. Thanks, Bert.